It's mid-October, which means the fantasy football playoffs are right around the corner. But don't sit on the sidelines and be passive. Get in the game and figure out what guys you need to start and which guys you need to fade this week. Welcome to the NFL Week 7 Injury Report. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus. What is up, folks? NFL Week 7, mid-October, in my opinion, the best time of the year. You got college football going. You got NFL. You got baseball playoffs. You got hockey coming back. Just all good news in the fall time here. And like I mentioned up top, we are getting closer and closer to those fantasy football playoffs. And every single week matters more than the last one. And injuries are a massive part of roster management and your path to securing a fantasy football championship, whether that's offensive fantasy football or my IDP defensive lovers. And look, folks, if this is your first time joining myself, welcome. And if you've been here for a bit, cheers to you. Appreciate you stopping by. This is the NFL Week 7 Injury Report. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, we get a lot of these for some of these, high-profile guys or maybe just some fantasy guys. But no. This one is for my defensive lovers, your IDP fantasy here. Now, it is where we spotlight the defenses, the biggest defenses injuries for this week upcoming. However, because I understand if you play IDP, there's a good chance you also play offensive football. I will do a very brief offensive rundown at the end where I hit the wave tops and hit the surface level of the bigger names in the offensive side. But it is time for the defensive deep dive, something that has been long overdue. And we've got a lot here in Week 7. So let's go ahead and kick it off here. Kick it off with, as most injuries are, not always the best news. Defensive tackle for the Chicago Bears coming off their big win against the Commanders on one of those Monday night games in the doubleheader. Did not play last week and has already started off the week with 2 straight did not practice there. Not a great sign, obviously, with him not playing last week. Now, Jarrett, he was coming off a major knee injury in the offseason. We haven't gotten much details about, is this a re-injury type thing? Is this a new injury? Unfortunately, sometimes the teams only really have to give kind of the body part and just did they practice or did they not? And even then, it's like, a limited practice could be anything from 1 snap to everything but 1, right? So we don't have a ton of information here, unfortunately, but 2 straight did not practice to start the week, not playing last week, as my cat furiously fights to get into the screen here. That is obviously not a good sign for Grady, Jarrett, and his availability this week. He is a big player up front for the Bears defensive line, but they were able to secure the W without him last week. So I would not expect him to be able to roll him in their lineups. Hard to really give timelines, how long is this going to last type deal, because there's really not a lot of info. But a guy we do get a little bit more info from, Jarrett Sneed, cornerback for the Tennessee Titans. Obviously was a premier guy when he was with the Chiefs. Then he went over to Tennessee and kind of ups and downs. And injuries were a huge role in those ups and downs. And the quad injury that he's popped on the injury report is kind of the big one, right? He kind of was in and out of the lineup, was dealing with this in the offseason. It was this quad injury. And the scary part is it seemed like he was healthy, but then all of a sudden he popped up with a did not practice to start the week for Jarrett Sneed there. And the quad is really what was the concerning part. Now, when we talk about the quad, that's your quadriceps muscle. So the muscle on the front part of your knee here. So this illustration kind of is more demonstrating a patellar tendon rupture and then a repair. But as you can see at the top of the quad, the patella is kind of that pulley level for your quad tendon to attach to your lower knee and kind of allow the quad to react and act. And now this is typically more of a quad strain, or it can be sometimes that upper ligament there, that quad tendon, as we call it, can be fully torn. Potentially, he was probably dealing with a fairly severe strain or sprain rather last year. But this season, it was kind of like, all right, had some things in the offseason. I think we're past that. But this was the kind of like, oh boy, are we kind of jumping back into this? He's not going to be out here for a while. Well, he was able to have a limited practice today, which is obviously a great sign. Maybe it was a potential, hey, part of a rehab thing that we can sometimes see, or it was bothering him a little bit. And they're like, knowing the history, let's be super cautious with this guy and like not practice him. So the limited practice today is an encouraging sign. Obviously, we want to see this upgraded to a full practice tomorrow on Friday. But at this point, when I first saw this yesterday, kind of the bells and the alarms were going off because this is something he's dealt with multiple times last season, kind of in the training camp, in the off season. But it seems like things are trending in a positive direction for Jarrett Sneed in that quad injury. Now, let's get to a guy who, by the time this is released, the game will probably be going on, and hopefully you know this. But Trey Hendrickson, a guy who's not going to be out there tonight. Cincinnati Bengals defensive end, led the league in sacks last season, and he's been the top sack guy for the past 2 years, but collectively. And unfortunately, off to a little bit rougher of a start. He had that long holdout where they finally, finally got the contract done. Typically, we see sometimes a slower start and a bit of a higher re-injury risk. We're kind of week 6. I don't know if we can really attribute to that, but he picked up a back injury. And back injuries are tricky because, as anyone, a large majority of us have dealt with low back pain at one time. You wake up one day and it can feel completely different. You maybe didn't even do that much and you're like, man, my back really tweaked my back and things like that. And sometimes in football, it can be a lot more serious where we talk about a structural issue, something that, whether it's nerve related or a vertebrae or something that, oh boy, we gotta kind of worry this might be, not only season, but career threatening. Thankfully, this is not the case for Trey Hendrickson. He had an MRI, came back clean. He was even questionable this week, despite the short turnaround. He just wasn't able to feel good enough to go tonight on Thursday Night Football. So obviously, with only 3 days to heal, that's tough for any injury. But it does seem like this is not a major injury, more of that muscle tweak, muscle strain, where the expectation is he should return next week. Now, I think the bigger question is what team does he actually play for next week? He's a hot trade commodity. The 49ers, the Eagles, a lot of these kind of contender types that are trying to, they're lacking, right? Obviously, Eagles, Zadarius Smith retired, Nolen Smith on the IR right now, Nick Bosa out for the year. So he's going to be a hot name. We'll see if the Bengals want to move off him. I obviously brought Joe Flacco in to try to still compete for this season, but Trey Hendrickson, the good news, back injury, not super concerning. He should be back out there and in your lineups playing for whatever team he plays for next week. Now we're going to do a stretch of guys that we're looking to return, whether it's from the IR or off several weeks of not being able to play, or the pup, guys that are looking to make a return back. One guy who will be playing for those Cincinnati Bengals is rookie defensive end Shemar Stewart. Been dealing with an ankle injury for the past 4 or 5 weeks. Would typically make me think it's more of the high ankle sprain variety, or eversion. Inversion sprain is that typical, you roll your ankle playing basketball type deal. Hey, it hurts for a week or two, but, ice it, elevate it. You should be pretty good. Do some movement, things like that. But the high ankle variety is a lot more damning. This refers to the ligaments between your tibia and fibula, your 2 lower leg bones. It's a much harder it's a syndesmosis, as they call it. It's kind of a bunch of ligaments together. It's a much harder to damage, which means it requires a lot more force, which in turn means it takes longer to get back to playing. So usually more of a 4 to 6 week variety, even in the mildest cases, which would line up well. I think this would be the 5th week for Shemar Stewart since the injury. I think he got injured in week 1. So it looks like he'll be back out there, hopefully having a good game right now as we speak. And then another guy, Titans, big nose tackle, defensive tackle from Texas, T'Vondre Sweat, also dealing with an ankle injury. This was his first week eligible to get activated off the IR after having to miss those 4 weeks. 2 straight limited practices in a row. It's a good sign that he has a chance to play this week, but, with these guys coming off long, kind of in more severe type injuries, limited practice isn't really enough. We want to see that full practice. Now, they could be taking it easy and, easing him in. And then, hey, if you're feeling good today, we've tested the ankle a little bit the past 2 days. Let's full practice Friday and get you ready to go game. Or like, hey, let's get you back into game shape, especially for a bigger guy. Let's make sure you don't get out there and re-injure it. So this is one we're going to have to wait till tomorrow to see, if he fully practices. Obviously, great sign. He's going to be good to go for Sunday. But if he does another limited practice, we're kind of in that zone where not really sure. And I'm not sure you want to trust him to be able to be out there in that first week. With the Titans and rolling out next to obviously Jeffrey Simmons, who is a great person to play next to and should allow you to get a lot more stats on your sheet there. Now, this is a big one here. Dre Greenlaw, one of the new additions for that Denver Broncos defense that seemingly didn't really need much help. But as many Broncos fans and as you've watched this Broncos team, linebacker has kind of been a weak point for this very good defense. Alex Singleton hasn't really looked the same coming off his ACL tear last year. Shenard has kind of stepped up nicely, but Dre Greenlaw was supposed to be, a really solidifying piece for this defense. He hasn't really been back fully since that Achilles tear in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And then, he picked up a quad injury, which there was some interesting reporting on this one in the offseason. There was some sides that were saying this was like a really big injury. He's going to miss the entire year. And then the Broncos and the agent came out and basically said, no, this is a minor thing. He's going to be back well before by training camp. It's not going to threaten the season, blah, blah, blah. Well, here we are in week 6, and he still hasn't played for his new team with this quad injury. So that tells me it was a pretty serious deal, grade 2 at least, if not a grade 3 full tear. Now, typically a guy doesn't go and have surgery without us knowing, and he would be out for the year if that's the case. So when we talk about grades, that's how you kind of measure the severity of an injury, because I know we haven't talked about it on this episode yet. Grade 1, minor, right? Micro tearing of the, muscle fibers, whatever that is. In this case, the quad. Grade 2, more moderate damage, more tearing, micro tearing. And grade 3 is a full tear. So it would be off the bone type deal. I don't think we're dealing with that because, again, that's kind of a season-ending surgery type deal, something that doesn't get brushed under the rug. But grade 2 in, bad cases can take up to 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing with Greenlaw. Now, based on what they said, off season, you don't have to report nearly as much. It really in season is where the NFL cracks down on reporting. So obviously it was kind of in between what was being reported out there. It wasn't, a minor deal that the team and the agent were saying, which obviously behooves them to do that, as offenses will have to kind of prepare for him and whatever until they realize he's not playing. And then, it wasn't, I don't think it was that full tear. Obviously he's going to be able to come back and play this year. Now, is this the week? He's returned to practice yesterday, and he's had 2 straight limited practices. Good sign that he's had back-to-back practices. But again, similar to Sweat, is it going to be another limited practice and he's not quite 100%? Let's give him another week. Or are we going to get a full practice and, he's cleared, good to go, full go. Let's let Trey Greenlaw be Trey Greenlaw. So that is what we have to watch out for. Obviously, in a defense that is very disruptive, creates a lot of havoc, he does have a potential to, whether it's interceptions, sacks, fumble recoveries, touchdowns, he's got the potential to be a big player. He's a hard-hitting guy. He's going to be stuffing, looking for TFLs and things like that. But this week, I'm not sure if we want to throw him right out there. We don't know if there's going to be a situation where they're going to limit his snaps and things like that. So with the 2 straight limited practices, good sign. But for this week, I think, for me, I'd be keeping him on my bench. And hopefully, if he looks good this week, we're going to roll him out there and you get a stud back in your lineups. Next guy, Chargers outside linebacker Khalil Mack. Coming back from that elbow dislocation. We broke this injury down weeks ago when it happened. Now we're 4 weeks later. He's eligible to come off the IR. And now, elbow dislocation just tells us that the elbow, basically was dislocated, which just means it was not in the joint properly the way it was supposed to be. There's a lot of different directions an elbow dislocation can go. They didn't really give us those specifics because they don't need to. But the nice part is that it doesn't require surgery. And it's kind of one of those, okay, let's get the joint, back in there. Let's put it back in place. And then let's let this kind of heal on its own and then stabilize it. He'll probably be wearing a brace, right, to help with the stability. But 2 straight limited practices. So again, he kind of falls in a very similar camp. Is this going to be the week we're going to see that Friday full practice, he's going to be good to go? Or, is this going to be a situation where we're easing a guy back? So definitely tomorrow, great reason to follow me on X at the DGen Doc. I will do injury reports every single day to give those updates and kind of get some of those insights to see, is this a situation where good to go? No, snap count or anything like that, or hey, he's going to be eased in because they Chargers brought over former Ravens outside linebacker Odafe Owe to help with that edge rush. So when you bring Mack back into that could be a solid group that could really wreak some havoc, and Mack could benefit from having another running mate over there. So I do like Mack, coming back season long. We just got to see if this week is the week. A couple more guys. One guy that I do have some confidence on enrolling in is Lions defensive tackle Alim McNeill. This is a guy who's coming off an ACL tear from last season. And this is someone that I think, to quote directly what Dan Campbell said, was barring any setback, Alim McNeill was freaking playing. All right. I think that's what he was saying on some radio station. But they play on Monday night against the Buccaneers and another Monday night doubleheader. He's been practicing for 2 weeks, and now today he had his first full practice. So the full expectation is you get a 21-day window to, start practicing before you either have to decide, is this player activated and back this week, or are they going to be out for the season, right? Because in 3 weeks, when you bring them back and you activate that window when you think they have a realistic shot to return, and if at that point in 3 weeks they're not ready to go, they're clearly back too soon, and you probably should shut them down anyway. So that's the way the NFL works. They brought him back 2 weeks ago. He started practicing. Now it seems like the week, hey, he's going to be ready to back there. Typically, ACL tears year one post-production can be they can dip down. More so for your skill guys, your DBs, even maybe your linebackers or your wide receivers, running back type deal. Typically, the big boys are a little bit better. Now, McNeill is a huge part of this defense. Him and DJ Reader, they need to work to stop the run in this Buccaneers running game. He's also a guy that is great with interior pressure and can get you some sacks from that D tackle position. So I think that if you're lacking a spot right now, especially, D tackle, I think Liam McNeill is a guy that you can have a little bit more faith. He's had 2 weeks to practice and ramp up. Now we're going to be a full go coming off that ACL tear. Another guy, Kenny Phillips, Indianapolis Colts cornerback, been out, I believe, 2 if not 3 weeks with an Achilles injury. Originally, they called it a calf injury, but now it's kind of being called an Achilles injury. Calf obviously refers to typically your gastroc muscle. Your calf is technically your gastroc and your soleus underneath it. But the gastroc is the one they're usually referring to when they talk about a calf. Now, the calf connects to your heel to allow, motion through that joint. Through that Achilles tendon, it's that long white piece you see from that, pink piece coming down from the muscle. That is your Achilles tendon. Now, Achilles, typically when we hear it in the sports sense, we think of Achilles tear, or Achilles tendon rupture, where, that's kind of that, you can see that calf reverberate of that. And when that tendon snaps, it's kind of that feeling of where that players say that sensation of almost like you got shot in the leg or something popped back. Like, it was just kind of like all of a sudden, right? But when they say Achilles, they're typically called maybe more tendonitis type deal, where that tendon is just getting a little bit degradation, a little bit of breaking down, or a little bit irritated, right? It is kind of what can be going on there. And obviously you want to be careful, because if you have a situation where this tendon is slowly breaking down, now you're getting a little bit more susceptible for that full rupture. So it's not something you want to mess with, but it sounds like this may be the week that Kenny Moore returns, which is good because, he's had 2 straight limited practices. So we'll see if he can upgrade that to a full, but right now the expectation is he's able to play. And that is good because they're likely going to be out his running mate, Charvarius Ward, who's dealing with a concussion. I'm sure you've heard by now, but he was warming up and ran into one of his fellow teammates, one of the tight ends there, I think Ogletree, and he suffered a concussion. I mean, they ran into each other and they hit heads, and obviously Charvarius Ward came out the worst for the wear. He's in concussion protocol. He did not practice today. If you don't practice by Thursday, you need a limited and a full practice to clear concussion protocol. So that pretty much rules him out. He's not going to be able to do both, obviously, just in one day. So Charvarius Ward is going to be out, but potentially Kenny Moore will be back for the Colts. Another guy, a rookie who's looking to make his season debut, defensive tackle Walter Nolen out of Ole Miss, dealing with a calf strain. This was one that was originally kind of underreported. It happened in training camp a couple weeks before the season. They were like, hey, he's working through, he's progressing it, and then they put him on IR, and then we're like, oh, okay, this must be a pretty big deal, right? Not one of those grade 1 where it takes 2 to 3 weeks, but grade 2 where we can looking at anywhere from 4 to 8, if not longer. So obviously it was in that grade 2 range, but he was finally having his practice window opened, limited practice times 2. So, back on the soapbox of, is this going to be a full practice and he's ready to go, or a limited practice? Now, what I will say is, and the calf strain here is what we were just seeing with the Achilles, but obviously now it's the calf muscle there. So again, thinking that grade 2 moderate tear type. He's a rookie. Never played a snap in the NFL. So probably not someone I'm trusting in my lineup right away. A lot of potential, would be playing next to Calais Campbell, who's having a great season, by the way. I'd love to see that from the veteran. I would probably be cautious to roll Walter Nolen out in my lineup. Rookie, getting his first snaps, coming back from almost an 8-week injury at this point. I'd be slow to pull the trigger on that one for Walter Nolen. Another guy who's already been ruled out, like Charvarius Ward, how I'm putting him. Jags linebacker Devin Lloyd, who's also having a great season. Obviously, had that massive pick 6 against Patrick Mahomes on Monday or Sunday Night Football, whatever day that was, in prime time. They're playing in London this week against the Rams. They already ruled him out to begin the week, so obviously you're going to see, did not practice. He's not even with the team in London. He didn't travel with them. Typically, it means the calf wasn't something minor enough that he had a shot to play this week. We'll see going forward if they have, if he's going to be able to play next week. It's kind of going to be one of those, we got to wait till Wednesday to see if he's out there practicing the following Wednesday here. But he's going to be out this week, so no Devin Lloyd, who's probably been an IDP stud for you this year if you were lucky enough to grab him. Another guy who's looking to return, Andrew Van Ginkel, a guy who I've sung his praise a lot, and unfortunately I've had to talk about him multiple times. Dealt with a concussion, then he got a neck injury, and neck injuries are very scary. The flags were raised with Nnamdi Madubuike, who they eventually ruled out for the season, where I was kind of telling you, look, neck injuries, not something you want to mess with, right? There's a lot of structures going on with the neck. Also, in the game of football, if your neck is compromised, the last thing you want to do is go ahead and bash heads and bash helmets with somebody. So, got to be careful with necks. We've seen Chris Carson. We've seen, Peyton Manning had to have a surgery where he was obviously limited. Chris Carson in his career, it looks like Zach Moss may be on that path. We'll see. Hopefully not the same for Nnamdi Madubuike, but obviously shut down for the year. So I was a little worried about Van Ginkel, but thankfully it does not seem as serious. Returned to practice this week, coming off their bye week. 2 straight limited practices. Obviously, love this guy. He's all over the field in a defense that suits him very well. He loves to jump those screen passes and fill up, defensive touchdowns, sacks, interceptions, whatever. This is a guy that if they clear him and he's fully practiced and good to go, I would trust. I think that there's a decent opportunity against an Eagles offensive line that is just not playing up to the standard that they're used to. They're giving up a ton of sacks. They give up 6 sacks to Denver. They gave up 3 sacks to my Giants. Great game, by the way, for those Giants. But Van Ginkel is a guy that is in such a good situation that I'm going to roll him out there if he's playing. Because I think there was a situation where he played in London. I think he only played 8 snaps and he got a sack and a TFL or something like that. The dude is just a monster. So if he's out there, he's a guy that I'm trusting as opposed to a rookie in Walter Nolen. All right, let's talk about some Eagles here. Jalen Carter kind of mysteriously popped up on the injury report with a heel injury. We all knew he was dealing with that shoulder, kind of was playing with one arm, which credit to him. He's been battling through a lot this year. Missed the game against my Giants on Thursday, but he's been, he said he's going to play. Now, is he going to be 100%? No, I do not think so. He had a full practice yesterday. Then he had downgraded to a limited practice today. Again, he said he's going to play. I'm going to trust that he's going to play. He's not going to be 100%, but he hasn't been all year. So I would imagine you're going to get a similar level of production. Now, Vikings offensive line, we'll see how they look coming off the bye. They were a very beat up group going into the bye. So, their center was dealing with multiple concussions. We'll see what that offensive line looks like against either Carson Wentz or J.J. McCarthy. There would be opportunities there to get a little bit of a pass rush and wreak some havoc against that Vikings offensive line. But he will not be 100%. He'll be limited If he's out there, he still has a chance to affect the game. Just not confident he's going to be able to turn those into sacks and tackles like we saw last season. Another guy for the Eagles, arguably just as important, if not more important, their cornerback number one, Quinyon Mitchell, the second-year guy who left the Giants game with a hamstring injury. Now, typically, if it's bad enough that you're not even going to attempt to come back into the game, hamstring injuries, you're usually out at least 1 week, if not 2, as we're seeing all over the NFL. Hamstring injury is one of the most common injuries and one of the most burdensome injuries because of their high re-injury rates, right? We talked about the grade 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, this is more the grade 1 type because he practiced in a limited fashion yesterday, and he got upgraded to a full practice today. Now, on one hand, great sign that he's very likely going to play this week, which coming off, I know they had the 10 days because of the mini bye, but he's just 7 days out from a hamstring strain. It's a good sign he's going to play. On the other hand, there is not many, if any, true hamstring strains. He was, and I'm going to say it was because he was hurt enough to not even attempt to return to the field on Thursday, that heal 100% in just 7 days. Now, we'll see. Obviously, they're getting their hands on these guys, but hamstring strains are notorious for having very high re-injury rates, especially in the first 2 weeks returning to play. So this raises some flags for me. Like, I'm expecting with him fully practicing today, he's going to probably go out there and give it a go against Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and in a good wide receiver group. They need him, right? But if we look at Landon Dickerson, if we look at Jalen Carter, the Eagles are not shy about playing guys who are hurt. And some injuries, you can do that. I'm a little bit nervous here that hamstring's not one you want to mess around with. You can turn something in from 1 to 2 weeks to 4 to 6 weeks very quickly. We saw it with Mike Evans. Emeka Buka's dealing with it right now. Like, a lot of hamstrings are, very, very common. So we'll see. I'm expecting him to be out there, but he's at least a moderate re-injury risk. Unless it's a situation that, hey, they thought it was worse than it really was. And then when they got the MRI or were able to look at some things, hey, there's not really a lot going on here, which, again, why wouldn't he try to at least give it a go in a game and see what he's working with? I didn't see him doing any work on the side. He just kind of stood there for the rest of the game. So a bit of a weird one. I hope I'm wrong, but I've got some caution here with Quinyon Mitchell. And then finally, Seahawks cornerback Devon Witherspoon and safety Julian Love. Been in and out of the lineup. Witherspoon dealing with the knee, Love dealing with the hamstring. Good to see them after missing the game last week. Both returned to practice, limited practice today. They play, this is their Wednesday report, so they play on Monday, which if you practice on Wednesday, that's a really good sign you're going to be able to play during the game. So kind of expecting both these guys to be back, but watch this one carefully because they've kind of been surprises for both of them, really, where it's like they look like they're going to play and then all of a sudden they rule out. So one you definitely want to watch between those two. All right, that is it for the defensive side. Like I promised, I'm going to do a very quick offensive rundown here. And then I'm going to go watch, hopefully, Pittsburgh Steelers beat down the Cincinnati Bengals. So for the offensive rundown here, very quickly, high surface, high-profile guys. Kyler Murray, back at practice, limited practice times 2, but he was throwing only to the practice squad receivers today. Jacoby Brissett was throwing to the starters. So it looks like we may get another week of Jacoby Brissett as QB1, who didn't look bad last week. So don't expect much from Kyler Murray, if anything at all. DJ Moore had a scary stay overnight at the hospital, but it seemed very precautionary. Was called day-to-day with a groin injury. Did not practice yesterday, but was a limited practice today, so he has a real shot to be able to play this week. Rashee Rice, back from suspension. First time that Worthy, Brown, and Rice will all be on the field. Load up on Rice if you have him. I'm expecting him to come back with full force here. Unfortunately, Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua injured his ankle, came back in the game, tried to play, wasn't really right, has not practiced the first 2 days. I would say he is doubtful at this point and likely not going to be out there. Another guy who won't be out there, Emeka Egbuka, dealing with a hamstring injury. This is something that the Bucs know very well with Mike Evans having a history of this. They're not going to push it. Do not expect him out there. He has a shot to be back next week. We'll have to see about practice sports. A guy who is going to be back, CeeDee Lamb, coming back from that high ankle sprain. This will be, I believe, the 5th week that he's able to, play. He said he could have played last week, but they want to make sure he was 100%. He said he's good to go. No limitations. If you have him, I would start him against a Commander secondary that is susceptible. Garrett Wilson, another guy who's not going to be out there. got an MRI, no major injury on the knee, but it was enough that it seems like he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. No practice this week so far. Marvin Harrison, here's a surprise. Concussion. Typically in the NFL, especially early on in the season, everyone with a concussion misses at least 1 week. But as the season goes on, these restrictions seem to lessen because guys start to make it back in a week. Marvin Harrison practiced Wednesday, practiced today in a limited fashion. He does need a full practice tomorrow to clear, but he's on the path to being able to play just 1 week after the concussion, which, if you look historically, happened a lot in the NFL. And then things started to kind of get more of a spotlight. So typically not a production dip. So if he's going to be out there, you want to roll him out there in your lineups. Chuba Hubbard back and says he's going to play this week, says he feels 110% despite only having limited practice. They're kind of slowly ramping him up. The thing here is Rico Dowdle has come alive. So what's this split backfield going to look like? I still think Dowdle is going to get a little bit more this week, but Chuba Hubbard is a captain for them. He's not going to go away. So the Rico Dowdle juice is only going to last for so long. Terry McLaurin, a guy who was expected to play this week, practiced yesterday, but was downgraded to a did not practice today. Never like to see that. Not a good sign. Hasn't been practicing the past couple weeks. Maybe he's not ready to go. We got to get more information on why he didn't practice today, but not a good sign for McLaurin. And then finally, Brock Bowers, no practice this week. Raiders have a bye next week, so do not expect him out there. They're going to wait until after the bye to bring him back. All right, folks, we talked about a ton of injuries. If you like what you heard, go ahead and do me a favor and drop me a like and a subscribe here to IDP Plus, where we talk football 24/7 all the time. And of course, we talk all 22, not just the offense. We talk defense over here. Hey, folks, I will see you next week, same time, bunch of different injuries. From the DJ Doc here at IDP Plus, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.